finding big opportunities by working for a young company, learning how to work with different personality types, and living on purpose every day to bring sustainability, service, and stewardship to farmers. That's what we're covering today on this episode of the Uplevel Dairy Young Leaders podcast. This is a special podcast series for producers and professionals in the first 5 years of their dairy careers that you can find on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast and on its own platform, Uplevel Dairy Young Leaders. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and it's my mission to connect you with others who are like you, driven to make a difference and determined to do it in the dairy industry. Whether you're on the farm or in the field, this is the place to plug in to hear how your peers are overcoming challenges and stepping up to lead the way as dairy's future decision makers, movers, shakers, and innovators. If you know someone in the first 5 years of their dairy careers, send them a link to the show that's created just for them. And our featured young leader today is Taylor Zeltwanger. He joins us from Morris, Minnesota, where he resides with his wife. This 2020 South Dakota State University grad started working for his uncle's company, NutraDrip, while in college, and 5 years later has channeled his massive energy and executory skills into a career helping farmers capture the value of precision ag and sustainable farming practices. Taylor tells us about his path, the challenges that have come up along the way, and the powerful sense of purpose he finds in serving farmers every single day. Enjoy this conversation with Uplevel Dairy Young Leader, Taylor Zeltwanger. Taylor, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I grew up on a family farm, and when I was 6 years old, another family actually approached my family, and they ended up putting a 5,000 cow dairy on our home farm. And so I spent a lot of Saturdays in the mastitis parlor eating donuts and milking cows when I was 7, 8, and 9. And that was my first exposure to dairy and some of the operations that occurred there. And then throughout my high school career, I didn't enjoy milking cows all that much, so I tried to figure out a way to get into a tractor as quickly as possible, and went down the road and worked for another family operation for 4 or 5 years in high school, just running tractors, mergers, rock picking, all the kind of pressure washing, a lot of things all the time. And that's what I did in high school. Farm background, love farming, love agriculture, definitely a passion of mine. And because of that, I knew I like to work with things, but I also like to work with people. And so in December of 2018, I started working for NutraDrip, and that's currently where I work today. So that'll be 5 years here in a couple months. And it's just been this continual growth. But at that moment in December of 2018, or leading up to that moment, was when I was able to figure out, like, hey, this is my passion. This is what I'm good at. And here's a need for somebody. And to put those circles together, it clicked.
For those that are familiar with NutraDrip, give us the elevator pitch of what NutraDrip is and what this company does.
So NutraDrip is a subsurface drip irrigation company that was started in 2012 by my grandparents and then my uncle's curtain ted. And what we do is we sell, install, and service drip irrigation systems across the Midwest. And we just recently added an agronomy service, and we've been getting involved in wastewater or manure management for dairies in the upper Midwest in the last 5 years. And what we specifically do is specialize in irrigating and fertigating odd-shaped hilly fields. And that involves burying plastic lines that are 5/8 or 7/8 in diameter, 12 to 16 inches below the soil surface. And then they're plowed in every 40 or 60 inches across a field, depending on your soil type and farming practice. And so this irrigation system has no evaporation, no runoff. It covers every acre of a field and allows for the most efficient application of in-season nutrients. That's what NutraDrip is. And above all that, the culture is, there's a whole bunch of people that are trying to add value to a whole bunch of farmers.
And so for you, Taylor, what does that mean that your everyday looks like?
Yeah, so my primary role every day, so I manage the territory, what I call the Northern Territory for our company. Um, we have the privilege of operating in, I think, 9 or 10 states now, and my territory covers Minnesota, South Dakota, and North Dakota. And just serving the growers that we have in that region, whether it's taking some service calls, coming in, coordinating those with guys, or agronomy support in season. Hey, I don't know what to apply here. This is what history said. This is what this test is showing. And then trying to figure out, well, is that the right test to even be running for this? That is a little bit what we do on agronomy, but primarily I focus a lot on sales, new business. So going out, meeting with customers, a lot of guys say, hey, I have this crazy shaped field. Can you irrigate it? Is it worth it? And so showing up on guys' farm, getting to know them, looking at the field, taking all that information back, plugging it in, coming up with a plan, saying, hey, yes, we can do this. This is what it looks like. Here's how it's going to happen. Here's who's going to be doing it. What does success look like to them at the end of the day? That's what we're trying to get to, right? And so usually it involves trying to work that back. Like, okay, what do you need to be successful? Because sometimes there's tile that needs to happen before irrigation. Other times there's tillage management practices that need to change. There's so many different things within agriculture that you have to, when you go to consider all those variables, it just takes a lot of time and effort. So sort through the little details.
So these days you're doing these assessments, the troubleshooting, the problem solving, the planning, and really honing in on what that producer's vision of success looks like for their farm and for that particular field. What would you tell 20-year-old Taylor?
If 20-year-old me would listen to 24-year-old me, that's my first question. If the answer is yes, I would listen to myself 4 years ago, or I would say figure out who you are. Because if you can't if you struggle to figure out who you are, then figure out who you're not. Because you have to know who you are and what you desire in life before you can answer the questions, where do you want to go and how are you going to get there? So for me, that was figuring out that I was not the person I thought I was. I was living a life that I needed to change. And I figured out I wanted to be a follower of Christ. And that, I guess, that is what changed my life for the better and put me on a pathway to consistent growth through the Spirit, through the Word of God.
Was there a moment?
Oh yeah. Yep, there was definitely a moment. Yep. My brother called me up one afternoon, my younger brother, and basically in essence said, I'm giving my life to Christ. We knew from a very young age that was what was expected of us. And it was our decision. We were always told, hey, someday you will have to make this decision. Because if you don't make it in this life, you're going to make it in the next one. And all of a sudden, you never think about it. You're living in the here and the now. And I was 3 years into college, just doing things that I thought were, doing things that I thought were getting me farther in life than they really were. I love to be around people. And so getting to college and being around people and alcohol was like my number one thing. And all of a sudden my brother's calling me and we're having a conversation and I'm like looking at my life the last 3 years and it was God that just hit me, see who you are. And I was nothing at that point. I didn't know what I really wanted to be doing in life. I didn't know who my friends were. I didn't know who I was. Mm. And at that point, I'm like, okay, I give up. I'm done trying to live for myself. I want to live for something different. You get to that point, and then all of a sudden God hears you and away you go. And you just don't look back. And every day you wake up, gonna serve. Don't know how some days, but you do. You find a way.
So if your advice to 20-year-old Taylor was know who you are, who would you say you are now?
I would say that the first thing that always comes to my mind, if people ask me, what do you do for a job, or who are you? I say, I'm a Christian. I follow Christ, and a lot of people are like, that's not what we expect for response. Like, oh, I thought you'd tell me about your work or something else. But no, who I am is I'm a follower of Christ and steward the resources that he's given me by following his word and the Spirit of God.
Oh, that's awesome, Taylor. And so, okay, how do you bring that into the work that you do every day?
The word that I think of is stewardship. And there's so many examples in the Bible of what that looks like. Serving others, being responsible with resources that have been entrusted to myself, to my wife and I, to my uncles, my family, the work, the farmers that we interact with. Just considering that a blessing just to be on someone's farm and have them spend the time with you for a couple hours showing you around, even though you may never do business with them. You may never put a system in, just things that can happen. But when you get home and you think about what happened and who you were and what you said, and you realize that you can be a light, an example by the Spirit that lives within us, then that person received that, not because it was me that did it. It was just that I allowed myself to be used by God. There's nothing that I can do as a human being to make that impact. It has to come from a higher power. And so just being a steward of who I am, what I have right now today, and availing myself to allowing God to work through me in others' lives.
Let's add one more lens to that when you talk about stewardship, because your career path you chose is all about the stewarding of the earth's resources.
And the stewardship is essentially sustainability. And so being able to ask the question directly, how are you stewarding this land? How are you stewarding your fertilizer program, your agronomy, tillage practices? Is that what's best for you? It's 100% tied into the gospel, which is awesome. It's great because it always makes a great segue into conversation about the gospel and a way to bring that about, because you can always tell a Christian by one characteristic is they always want to talk about Christ and the gospel, right? Like that's what happens. Evidently, it always comes out in some way. That's just what happens, I guess, for me. It's because that overarching. Did I choose to do this? Yes, but choosing to do it in the way that I feel that God has led me to do it is why I'm here. Not like I just went out and made the choice. There's a lot of things that played into that.
A lot of little pieces of a path that all lined up, and they put you in a position now, Taylor, to not just be in a career and have a job doing what you do, but that allows you to be that light and to serve a big purpose. And ultimately, you're using your career in this industry as part of your bigger mission and commission.
I think to myself oftentimes that people spend their whole lives trying to find a dream job or figure it out, whatever it is. And here I am, I get to wake up every day, have interactions like this, but on farms, around agriculture, around things that things that really hit home emotionally for guys and gals. And I get to go home every day after one of these conversations and just first of all, prayed, and okay, hopefully I didn't say anything too dumb, and hopefully what I said, the Spirit takes and they heard it the way it was intended to be said, and then you get to hit the pillow like, wow, that was amazing. Um, and I just hope that other people can get that same experience out of their jobs, life, marriages, whatever it is. It comes back to service.
Yeah, absolutely. And just by sharing this piece of your career, but your big purpose, this is all in service to others. And I think there'll be other folks out there that hear this particular part of your career journey and relate to it in a really powerful way. I always like to ask guests on the Uplevel Dairy Young Leaders podcast about the biggest challenge they faced in their career so far.
Yeah, I know what my biggest challenge is, and I know what it will always be, and what it is today, what was it yesterday, and what it will be tomorrow, and that's myself every time, hands down. So what I mean by that is I don't know what I don't know. And as a young person that's involved in the industry, you get excited and you're passionate about agriculture and the things that you do, and you want to get better and grow and develop more. And yet I'm only 24. And so there's just things that you don't know because you're 24 years old, and there's not a lot that you could do about that. I don't know where I seen, if it was LinkedIn a month or two ago, where it's one of those situations, as Warren Buffett was quoting it, he said, you can't take 9 women and make a baby in a month. There's just things that take time. And it just hit me like, okay, that's part of this process. That's part of developing yourself, a business, where you want to go in the future. Is there's things that take time, and I don't know what I don't know. And so that has been my struggle is, well, what don't I know? And you get all these new ideas from books and you're trying to figure out certain specific problems in a business. What can we do to increase profit margin? Or how do we increase this efficiency on an install? Or tons of different things that you can always attack. But if you never step back and look at yourself, and you're looking at the process and not the people, the culture type stuff, that is way, way more important, in my opinion, than those processes. Well, it is initially, of course, you have to have that, right, to develop good processes, but not getting in the way of myself, realizing I don't know what I don't know, and then trying to ask people for the feedback of what I don't know.
Okay, you're laying out a lot here, Taylor. So, is there a particular time that comes to mind when you talk about really identifying this challenge of you being your own biggest challenge? And just to preface also, when you say this is all of us. Like this is almost everyone. And if you don't recognize that, you're missing the boat. So, kudos to you at 24 years old for calling this out at the age you are at, because you are already, just by recognizing, having awareness, moving yourself forward so much faster. But getting back to, a time that comes to mind when this just played out in front of you, almost like a movie. Tell us about that.
Yeah, actually last week this just happened. So great timing. So we're trying to grow a business and develop structure, and I was able to actually pick up a guy to take a lot of the service and operation work from me and kind of take that and run with it and develop it, make it better. I'm an ideas guy, I'm a social guy, but I need help with planning because I'm an executor, but so I will just go and execute even when there's not a good plan, which doesn't really end very well. Because then there's a lot of people that stand around and like, okay, we did something, but what did we actually get done? Well, it wasn't a lot because we didn't plan through it. My brother helped me find a guy that was really good at it, and we picked him up. And so throughout this transition process, and hiring and then, well, what is he specifically going to do, and drawing that out. This employee has been able to ask me questions about, well, what are you doing about this now? About your sales process, or how are you organizing this stuff? And just really simple questions that I haven't asked myself, but coming from him in a different perspective, it's made a world of difference and created an awareness in me. Like, wow, I wasn't aware of these things. Now I am, thanks to these questions from this person. We can make a plan and execute, and it works because there's this awareness. And so one of the things was, we have been doing some R&D work up here, and my uncle has been involved. My uncle is the owner of our company. So he's the owner, he's, the final say guy doing R&D work. So there's some CapEx involved. And so you're trying to sort through, where do I fit here? Am I, this is in my region, but it's not my company, but I'm involved in the company. So how do I make these decisions? And I can be a planner if I need to be, but I just need to be told that I am, or I need to not told, I just need to be saying, hey, this is your responsibility, right? And so what happened was, we did this R&D project, we showed up, and everything was going to work like it, hey, well, this is the plan. Oh, perfect. And of course it's R&D. So you need to have like plan A and then B, C, D, E, F, G, all of them, right? It's not an R&D where you're trying to learn as much as you can. And so you need to be able to try a whole bunch of different plans. And that means there's different pumps you got to have ready, different fittings that need to be on site, and all this stuff needs to be taken care of. And none of it was. There was a plan A. And if that didn't work, well, then we were going to go to plan B. But plan B hadn't been thought through. None of this is his fault, or it's equally his that is mine, I guess. And because there wasn't this communication. And so I was frustrated. At the end of the day, I was pretty upset. And I was like, what happened here? What could have I done better? And it was that time in business where he, as a leader of a company, has an entire 5 other regions, Kansas, Arkansas, all these different places that he can focus on. And actually, this was my opportunity to say, hey, actually, this is my responsibility. I appreciate your help. You can be there, but I'm the lead on this. Mm-hmm. And so I called my other uncle, because they own a business together. And I'm like, hey, here's what I'm frustrated about. What am I missing? What haven't I, what's going on here? And he just said, well, why don't you say this to him? Why don't you communicate this to him? Why are you calling me? And I'm like, well, because it's my own fault. Because all I had to do was say the same thing. And so I got upset at him for not planning on a project, but I had just done the same thing with our company, and the way that these positions are, not positions, but who's responsible in this region. So I hadn't planned that out. So the next day I was like, okay, I'm going to put a plan together. We're going to work together in the day. So I made a little Excel sheet with who's on site, what do we got for equipment, who's responsible for the pumps, VFDs, electrical, all this stuff, put it all together, put it on the spreadsheet. At the end of the day, the company we're working for and doing R&D with asked, okay, who's the lead guy? And I said, it's me. I'm responsible for all these things. And then these guys are the assistants. Here's their jobs. Here's what we're going to do next week going forward. And, my uncle looked at me like, yep, sounds great. And it was it. And so I had built this whole thing in my mind of, well, this is my territory, but he's the owner of the business. What do I do here? And it was that time when I needed to call another person, and they said, well, this is when you take action. Like, you have to do something here, right? And it's time that you step into that role, because it's never there's never a moment, right, when somebody says, in a small business especially, there's never going to be this perfect, clear-cut, defined, okay, now we're doing this. It's always like that process where you all of a sudden you pick your head up and you're like, oh, we're doing that now, And so how do you identify those things? I don't know. But that's the experience that happened.
That totally makes sense, Taylor. And what I hear through that story, to kind of pull it all together, is, so here you had a project for the company, and you really were leading the project, but maybe it didn't quite see yourself as the leader of the project. So you were in a position where you had an opportunity that here you are and you're being trusted with a lot of responsibility, and you see yourself as young in your career, young in the field, and having senior people around you. But this project was a big deal. And it is a big deal when all of a sudden you realize that you look around and when someone asks who's in charge, you're like, "Oh my gosh, it's me." It's me. And so here you had this opportunity to really recognize one, your role as a leader, but that came, kind of after going through the experience of saying, okay, well, next time, in order to do this, we need to have a different way of planning and a different way of, as you said, you are an executor. Like, that is your strength. But what you learned through this, it sounds like, is that you sometimes have to recognize what you're being entrusted with as a leader in your company, and that you are trusted, and that in that position, there's some things that you're going to have to learn how to do that maybe don't come naturally, like the planning side.
Yeah, 100%. I would say the nice part about it is it's those things that, so as I put together this plan, and it's an art, it's a research and development, field site plan, or however you want to word it. But basically it's who's on site, what do we have on site for equipment, who's responsible for what are the plans, and what are the, every day, what does the plan look like? What have we tried? And then the data that we're tracking. And you go ahead and take a half a day to make that sheet, and now you never have to do it again. You can always change it up a little bit, but it's done now. And it's this little thing that it's just so crazy when you that's all it took to do that and to make it clear, right? Because the whole thing is on R&D, especially, I mean, everything, but R&D, you want clarity of are we actually trying to accomplish, because you can gobble up a ton of CapEx cost in no time. Just trying this, trying that, but if you never, like, what are we actually, so at the top of the sheet, I like main goal and primary goal, or, we know that you can always see those, but making that now, and I made it, I just out of necessity, out of failure, is where it came from, and now it's done. And I'm hoping to apply it on future R&D projects.
Yeah, and so you took that experience and now you have a template. So Taylor, this is a huge takeaway. It may seem like a challenge that came along in your journey, but do you also see how this sets you up and the whole company for future success? That is fantastic that you were able to look at this situation. And I'm guessing there were probably some moments of discomfort in the process and things that you're like, oh, this isn't, how you wanted to be moving through it. But how much better will the next project go because of it?
Yeah, it will go extremely well because there's no other option. And I know what it looks like. I think that was the biggest holdup in my mind is I didn't, you're like, okay, we're going to do this. I'm responsible. Well, what does that look like? And for me, so many times I'm overcomplicating what it looks like. And all I got to do is just, okay, what's the main goal? Who's here? What are we trying to accomplish? And what are we going to accomplish it with? And just putting that out there on paper and getting input from the teammates on those specific questions, and bam, like, okay, there it is. It's cleared up. And it's just, but it takes a little bit of effort. You're creating something out of nothing, but oftentimes it's really not. You don't have to. It's not as hard as you think it's going to be.
So what I'm hearing through what you just shared, Taylor, is the value of taking time to gather some input and do some planning, set clear goals and expectations. And do you know what the magic piece of the puzzle is? You write it down. You write it down. Because if it only exists in your head, it doesn't exist in anyone else's either, not the way that you see it, right? So this is your way of bringing clarity to a process And that is such a fundamental piece of success in working with other people is clarity because of the nature of the business that you're in is like you're going to have so much freedom to do things that you almost have to operate with an entrepreneurial mindset.
Oh, 100%, 100%. That's one of those a privilege that I have among many is an entrepreneur. To be an entrepreneur, the ability to grow a business that you didn't necessarily start and to be involved with that has been awesome. And so that's one thing that I'm really thankful for where I'm at. And one of the reasons I love where I'm at is because that opportunity to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So you get to help build something from the ground up. And does that excite you?
It's always exciting. I have a very opportunistic mindset. Well, if people ask you on a scale of 1 to 100, how many opportunities do you have? It's 100 every time. Like it's endless. There's never a shortage. It's always exciting to you when you have a business because you just like, oh, man, this could be huge. It's just up to me. Nobody says you can't or can. It's totally up to inside.
Yeah.
Figure it out, get it done.
Absolutely. So let me swing back with a question for you about that, because what I've learned as an entrepreneur myself, who also, I see a lot of opportunities and sunshine and rainbows, every direction I look, right? The hardest part of that is deciding what to say no to and what opportunities you don't pursue. So how are you managing that?
You need to continually ask me that question, like every week. Text me, how are you managing your opportunities? Because I struggle with that a lot. I get excited about everything, and you try to put energy into all these different things. You end up getting nothing done, right? Everybody always asks the question, oh, are you busy? Yeah, I'm always busy, but don't ask me if I'm always productive, because that's two very different things. I would say that becoming aware of it was a first step in managing it. And I think that is continual awareness in every different piece of what I do. It seems like you relapse quickly. Like if I'm not focused on sales and different, making anybody that's in sales, you have a goal of how many people you want to make sure to reach out and contact, and you have touch points and cadences and all these things and metrics, and that helps you. But then all of a sudden I'm doing an R&D project, and now there's a different goal, and then I come back to sales, and it takes me a little bit to get my momentum back. And so I think right now I'm working through what do I actually need to do today to accomplish the overarching goal of our company, which is adding value to farmers, adding value to growers through drip irrigation. Well, farmers got to have drip irrigation in order to add value through it. So the first thing we got to do is get drip irrigation in the field, right? So that means a sale. So that means I need to focus on sales. And so working through those steps of, okay, if I need to focus on sales, so then who's going to cover these things? And do we have stuff set up? Okay, if we don't have stuff set up, can we hire somebody to do that? Oh, if we're going to hire somebody, do they know what we want done? And then it's outlining a clear expectation. Okay, we're going to hire you. You're going to do this thing, and this is what this is what success looks like for us. All that stuff takes weeks of time to do, and you're always redoing it. But getting on top of that, and then just asking myself the question, what do I actually need to do today?
And so, Taylor, we've talked about your experiences in these first few years of your career. What are a couple of the top resources that you find really helpful, like books, podcasts, things like that? What do you tap into to develop yourself?
I love books, podcasts, love information, and I have been heavy on those probably since I was like a sophomore in high school, junior high school. But recently, I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is to sit down and figure out who you work with. Like my uncles is for me, and then figure out who they are as a person. So if anybody's familiar with DISC profile, my one uncle is a D. and I'm a D. So it's very easy to get to a point and to get to results, and it's like a 5-minute phone conversation, and we have a very good understanding of where each other's at and what the expectation is or who's the problem. and I really enjoy that because that's how I operate. But my other uncle and a lot of other people in the company that I work with NutraDrip, is their S's and their C's. They're steady. They're not confrontational. They like to be, not just call them up, hey, how's it going? Blah, 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 blah. Here's a problem. Here's what I need help with. It's just like, whoa, that's too much. And I really struggle with that. It's always been a struggle of mine through high school, college, everything is man, this guy just thinks he knows what he's talking about, thinks he knows everything, and just a bullheaded dude. And my 6'4" frame does not help it. And so it's just this whole, like, how am I making other people feel? And when you want to learn and grow in a business and you aren't aware of how you make other people feel, and then you're trying to like ask them questions to give you feedback, and they're like, no, I'm not going to give you feedback because you make me feel not good. And you're just like, how am I supposed to fix problems that I'm not aware about? But eventually, like, okay, I'm aware that I'm making them feel uncomfortable enough that even though I'm asking them questions to give me feedback, it's not happening. And so I need to sit down and think, okay, if this person receives these things this way, then I must ask this type of question. And I need to wait for a response and not talk over them and all those obvious things that you don't do. And so figuring out who the people around me are and how they want to be interacted with, how they want to be communicated with. Like some guys, I'm better off emailing and not even picking up the phone because it's just going to go way easier. They can type it up. It's a lot less confrontational. And so the resources for growing and developing is like around me, and asking those people in specific ways how they need to be asked to give me feedback so that I may grow and develop with the company.
That's a really good one too, Taylor, because what I'm hearing through that is, you can do all the personality assessments and everything else in the world and have all that information in front of you of who's a D and who's an S and everything else. But if you don't intentionally change and adjust your style, it doesn't really get that far, does it?
No, I'll be the first one to tell you it does not get that far. And it's ongoing. I don't think I don't expect it to just one day it will go away. It's an awareness thing.
That's some good stuff. Well, Taylor, I tell you, it has been such a pleasure to have you on the Uplevel Dairy Young Leaders podcast. And thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Peggy. It's been awesome, and I love what you're doing. And with Uplevel Dairy, I didn't mention that podcast.
Oh, yeah. Feel free to throw that into the list.
I've been listening to that, and I am impressed with the simplicity of the advice given by your hosts and you. It's wonderful. It's little bite-sized pieces of information that are easy to take, digest, and implement.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. Appreciate that. Shout out back to Uplevel Dairy Podcast. Thank you for listening to the Uplevel Dairy Young Leaders podcast. Find these episodes on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast as well as the Uplevel Dairy Young Leaders podcast channel. And do your friends in their early dairy careers a favor by sharing this episode and this podcast with them. And if you want a space to network and plug in with other producers and professionals in the first 5 years of their dairy careers who are driven to make a difference and determined to do it in dairy, find us on our Facebook page and join the Uplevel Dairy Young Leaders Facebook page. And head on over to upleveldairy.com to subscribe to receive the Uplevel Dairy Podcast new episodes in your inbox every week. Appreciate you joining us for the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. This is Peggy Coffeen, and have a great day.